First of all, good morning. I'd like to start with my thesis presentation. Okay, so if you work in a creative industry, ideas are your product, right? We all know that good ideas lead to success, and we also know that bad ideas lead to failure, right? Therefore, you better make sure that your ideas are good, right? This is very important. Is this possible? How can you do this? Well, if you want to make sure your ideas are good, you have to first understand inspiration. How does it work? Where does it come from? And why do we need it? Okay? So let's start with the last question. Why do we need inspiration? Well, it's very obvious. We need inspiration to produce ideas. It's very simple. James Webb used to say, an idea is nothing more nor less than a new combination of pre-existing elements. Remember this guy? We met him in Japan. Goichi Suda was the one that was involved with the video game industry. He provided a very good example about this. He said when he was creating a new video game, his inspiration came from the movie industry. First was the movie El Topo by Alejandro Jodorowsky, because this movie is about dual fight, one-on-one fighting. He also was inspired by Star Wars, the lightsaber, and the character was inspired on Johnny Knoxville. So at the end you have a new combination, you have a new video game, No More Heroes. You can see the character looks almost exactly the same as Johnny Knoxville. He has a lightsaber, and all of the story in this video game is about dual fighting. So this is how it works in a very basic level. So as we can conclude that inspiration is essential to creativity, of course, but also is essential to business. This is very important. Andy Stefanovich, the founder of Play, my company in the US, says the following: if you're not feeding your employees with new inputs, you cannot expect new outputs. This is very important. Companies all around the world are expecting their employees to come up with ideas and innovation, but it seems like it's a corporate responsibility to provide them with new inputs. Otherwise, they won't be able to do it. So, there's a company that does this very well. It's called El Bulli. We all know this case. El Bulli is the best restaurant in the world, and what they do actually to provide new inputs is they close 3 months each year. So every time they close, they put a creative team together and they start attending courses of different disciplines, start visiting designers from other industries, and they visit even other countries. These last 3 months. After this, they come back to El Bulli and start working on the new menu. So this is how it works. You should first have new inputs and then start developing ideas. Ferrat Adrià says, ideas are the only thing that cannot be explained, but you can create methods to make them flow. So, if you want to make ideas flow, we shouldn't wait for inspiration to strike us. My idea is that we should be able to produce inspiration on demand. So every time you need to come up with a new idea, you should be able to produce inspiration, not just be sitting waiting for it. Okay? So, is this possible? Well, it is. It is if you know where inspiration comes from. So this is the main topic of my thesis. I call it the 4 sources of inspiration. This is a framework that I built for this. I discovered it while I was doing it. So how this works. It always starts with a creative task. You have to define a creative task. You have to have a goal or an objective. And then the 4 sources are, the first one I call it voices. The second source is your industry. Third one, other industries. And the fourth one is other disciplines. So let me explain each one of them. First, voices. Well, the first source of inspiration is about exploring different points of view. Let me give you an example. There's a laboratory called the Cavendish Laboratory in Cambridge, and a number of the most prominent scientists of the 20th century work there. So here's a picture, and the guy who discovered the electron worked there, Ernest Rutherford, etc. So most of the Nobel Prizes have come from here. So what is so special about this laboratory? What is so special about Cavendish? Well, it has a canteen. This is serious, I'm not joking. The director of the Cavendish Laboratory says the following: experience had taught me that laboratories often fail because the scientists never talk to each other. To stimulate the exchange of ideas, we built a canteen where people can chat at morning coffee, lunch, and tea. So there you go, very important. Voices are the first source of inspiration. What kind of voices should you explore? Well, it depends on the creative task, but the very basic ones are the following voices. You have to talk to end users, you have to talk to your clients, suppliers, your employees, opinion shapers, experts, and scholars. That's the first source of inspiration. Second source is your industry. The source is about spotting opportunities by exploring your own industry. Let me give you an example. We all know this very well. Bernbach explored the American car industry. He spotted some opportunities there, and he focused on what actually made the Beetle different to the other American cars. Came up with a very, very nice idea, think small. The inspiration for this piece actually came from the very car industry. So sometimes if you explore the industry you're working on, or even your product or your brand, you can also get inspiration. So the second source, very important, is your industry. You should look into your company, your brands, your competitors, distribution channels, and industry trends in this second source of inspiration. The third one is very important, and most of the companies I know fail to do this. They're very good at listening to voices. They do some research, listen to consumers. They're also very good at knowing and analyzing their own industry, but they almost never make the time or the effort to look at other industries. So this is very important because, as we know, light bulbs weren't invented by exploring candles, right? Iron ships weren't invented by exploring wood boats, and Walkmans weren't invented by exploring turntables. In other words, like a philosopher used to say, begin with another's to end with your own. This is very important. The third source of inspiration is about exploring other industries. Here's an example. There's a company called Better Place. They build electric cars, but the inspiration came from the cell phone business. So why the cell phone business? Very simple. In the cell phone business, you pay very little for the phone itself, but you're buying talk time on their network, right? Same thing here. Here you get a car for a cheap price, or sometimes nothing. You can get it for free, but you pay to plug into their grid. So now you're buying miles, not minutes. So this is very important. Actually, the business model came not from the car industry, came from the cell phone industry. You have to explore other industries. The basic ones are here. I'm not going to mention them all, there are a lot. And finally, the fourth source of inspiration is about exploring other disciplines. Ralph Lauren used to say the following: I could look at Ernest Hemingway and be inspired to do a whole collection. This is very true. Let me give you an example. There was a fight in 1962, Floyd Patterson against Sonny Liston, and this fight was scheduled 1 week after the launch of the October issue of Esquire magazine. So George Lewis got an idea for the cover of the magazine. He said, okay, I created a surrealistic image of the feet using a Floyd Patterson look-alike of how the world treats a loser. It was a very famous cover, maybe you've seen it before, but the inspiration came from art, another totally different discipline. There's a picture called The Toreador by Edouard Manet, and George Lewis says that he got the inspiration from this picture to develop that cover. He says, both images, the Toreador and the pugilist, are of courageous men whose livelihood is to fight for their very lives. So there you go. Other disciplines are the fourth source of inspiration. You can take a look at art, humanities, social sciences, natural sciences, formal sciences, professional and applied sciences. So there you go. These are my 4 sources of inspiration. Sounds great, but do they work? Well, I didn't know that, so I have to test them. Alright, so I make a test. What I did was very simple. I asked a bunch of people to come up with ideas for the same creative task. I chose a very general and common to everyone creative task, which was the following: ideas to improve the experience of going to a restaurant. You know, everyone has gone to a restaurant, so it's fair for everyone to solve this creative task. What's